Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Ben, William, for arranging this, the second version. I know the next one, call for a speaker, is already out. So we'll be talking about Query Store hints demo. So if you do not know what is Query Store, probably will be a little bit difficult to follow. But if you do not know, this is a good reminder for all of us to get ourselves educated about Query Store, because as I can see and I hear, Pedro Lopez and Joe Sack, there are more and more features are being built on top of Query Store to help us, people like me who works with the databases, to troubleshoot, tuning, find problems. So this feature that I'm talking about, Query Store hints, is in public preview for this version. So I'm not going to read this because I'll upload this in my GitHub repo, and I think the organizers also have a GitHub repo that I'll send them a link of my GitHub repo if they want to just put the link or copy the files. When to use this, right? This should not be treated as a permanent solution. As you know, we should not use any hint as a permanent solution. Trace flags, hints, plan guide, these shouldn't be treated as a permanent solution, right? This is something to put the fire out for now, and later on put it in our to-do list to take care of it. So, but even using a hint in our query as an option, sometimes it is not possible when the fire is raging, right? For an example, you do not have access to the source code, the code is generating by some application, or you have controls around your change of your code, which you should, you should go through a phase, get approval and all that. But there is a fire going on, you need to burn, extinguish it right away for the business to continue, right? It's always the goal is to business doesn't get impacted, and then everything else come after that. So if you have a situation like that, that you cannot even put a hint in your query, how can you, sneak in a hint behind the scene that will impact how your query is getting executed? So that's the problem Microsoft is solving with this feature. But in order to do that, what they're leveraging is the query store, because you need to know what the query ID is, and then you can sneak in a hint using that query ID, and we'll see that when you go to the demo. I'm not going to read these examples. These are pretty much from Microsoft documentation. I just put it here, so everything is in one place, just to give you some idea of what you can do, what kind of hints you can do, and there is a place to get a full list of hints that you can put in. How does it work? At a very high level, a query get executed, it get captured in the query store. You grab that ID of that query, and then you sneak in a hint using that query ID. There are a couple of people in the community, they have a bunch of resources for Query Store. Erin Stalto, who used to work for Security Skills, she's going to a new place, I don't know where. Deepti recently started a lot of blog posts around Query Store. So check those out. There are pro-site courses there, you can see. Good to know there are a couple of things that when you put a hint, this is going to override any statement level hints that you have hard coded, or if you have a plan guide hint. If the hint contradict, means because of this hint, this query cannot get past the optimizer, it will ignore the hint. So you will get your execution, it will just ignore the hint that you are providing. So your query execution will never get impacted. You can put more than one hint using this feature, which I'm going to show you. And your query hints are persisted. So it will survive a reboot. It goes with your backup, restore, the hints stays within your database. A couple of system objects that we'll use. I'm not going to read my contacts. You can just search SQL Worldwide, you'll see it. There are two more references that if you want to see more details about this feature. I already ran this. This is a notebook using PowerShell. Again, if you do not know what's a notebook and what is Azure Data Studio, please look this up. Ben and I was just chatting. This is not just for, it says Azure Data Studio. It's not for Azure. You can also use it for on-premises. I'm going to show the demo using Azure SQL Database. As you saw here, this feature is in public preview today, not for on-premises SQL Server, only for Azure SQL Database, Managed Instances, and Hyperscale. So this, if you follow this notebook, is going to set you up everything for the demo. And for the demo, I'm going to switch to Management Studio because there is a feature that I need to show you two query plans side by side, which I cannot get in Azure Data Studio. And Ben reminded me to put a support case or put a, sorry, what they call this, like a feature request. So I'll do
user voice item.
User voice item. Oh gosh, I need to get my terms right. Ben is here. Sorry. Okay.
But probably they don't call it that anymore. So
who knows? I'll check this out. I'm not going to read all these comments. I put enough comments because this is a fast-paced session. I only have 4 minutes left. So you can read this and please reach out to me if something doesn't make sense. In Azure, you cannot use user statements. So we are connected to QS hints database.windows. It's Azure SQL database. And I have to be in the right database context because I cannot say use this database. That's not allowed in Azure SQL database. So I'm just making sure that the query store is turned on by default in Azure SQL database, but it has the right features. It's turned on with the correct parameters that I want to see. I want to make sure that the read write is on because you can also have it. It can switch to a read only mode for different reason in the query store. Now, this is where you can see if you already have any hints against any query. Sys query store query hints. So just run that. I do not have any hint right now. I just want to show you that. I'll talk about some of these columns later on. Now, I have a table that is purposely designed just for demo purpose. As you can see, this agent ID has 100,000 records. This is a real estate keeping track of each agent and how many properties they are dealing with. But if you look at all other real estate agents, right, they all have less than 20 records. And this is a common problem in SQL Server. If you've been working with SQL Server for a while, you'll know when you first run this store procedure with this query, with the value of 101, we know that 101 has 100,000 records and the rest all has less. So the query that gets compiled and the plan that gets saved in the cache is actually optimal for a huge number of records. Later on, when you run it with a smaller, with a different agent ID who has very less number of real estates, you do not get optimal plan because that plan gets reused, which is also optimization in the SQL Server, but sometimes it doesn't work for you if your data is not distributed evenly, right? So now if we run this, and we see that execution plan, this is good. It's doing a scan using parallelism, and it used 18 megabytes of memory because it's a large data set. But problem is when I run it with 4, I'm getting the same plan. And now you see that I have 18 megabytes of memory and I'm still doing a cluster index scan. I'm doing parallel, so I'm taking more CPUs. I'm taking more memory. I don't need that. If you can take a look at the properties, it actually need less than a megabyte. So now what I'm going to do, I go and look at that query in the query store, and I see that the query ID is 4. You can get this ID in different ways, not just doing this. In SSMS, there's a report. You can look at that too. And now I replace this with the query 4, and I'm putting a hint recompile, means recompile this every time. I'm not suggesting you do this every time, because if you call this 100,000 times every minute, probably recompiling is not going to save you time, because recompile also takes some time. I'm just showing you some example here, and you can put other hints. I put in the comment if you need to, but this is strictly for demo purpose. Don't go and start putting this hint. So now we have this hint, and now if you go to that, you can see that I have a hint for query ID 4. This is my hint, and I want you to take a note of this 2 columns for future. This is not being used right now. It's saying that it's a user defined hint, but there's a source 0. So what Joe said in his, it's not a secret that only MVPs knows. It's open that in future, there is a new feature coming out that SQL Server will automatically put hint for you, looking at cardinality and other stuff. So keep an eye on that for newer features coming out. So now we have that hint, Now let's run this too. And if you go here, now you see that for two different IDs, we got two different query plan, right? Because of that hint. And now look at this. This one needed 18 megabyte. And here I only have 1 megabyte of memory. I'm not going parallel. I'm only using one CPU. Here I'm using whatever my maxed up setting is, right? And here I'm getting an index scan. Here I'm getting a seek. And I can also clear the hint using that. Now, if we go here, we can see that there is no more hint. And if we go and run this too again, we'll see that we are again back to where we were using the same plan. So I'm 1 minute over. Sorry about that. And I will stop here and give the time for the next speaker to get in. Thank you very much, Ben, and thanks all.